Hey guys, what's going on? Today I'm going to be talking about cancelled and unreleased Star Wars films and TV shows. I think this is something really interesting and there's some really cool ones. So I've picked out 5, I've gone through all the different cancelled and unreleased Star Wars projects, and I've gone through and picked 5 which I think are the most interesting and most relevant. And the reason I'm doing this video is because the other day I was speaking to my friend about a show which actually is on this list. And I remember speaking to him about it like 10 years ago when I was like 8 years old. Genuinely, we were so young. This was before Disney even took over Star Wars and Lucasfilm. And I remember us talking about it, this show, and it was talked about so much and it sounded so cool, and I just think there's so many cool projects and unreleased films and TV shows and different ideas that there is to talk about. So today I'm going to go through 5 of the most interesting ones I think, and 5 of the biggest which could have been the most impactful on the Star Wars universe. So I'll go through these 5 which I picked out and talk about why they got cancelled, if we will ever potentially see them in the future, what is the chance of ever seeing them, what were they about, who was going to be in them, who's going to direct them, all that cool stuff. But before we get into the video, please make sure to like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And let's get into the top 5 unreleased Star Wars movies and shows. So number 1 on the list is a Boba Fett standalone movie. Now this one is pretty recent, it's only from a couple of years ago when it was being talked about, and this was intended to be the second solo film, the second standalone movie after Rogue One. So this was going to be a standalone Boba Fett movie directed by Josh Trank, and it was intended to be revealed at Star Wars Celebration 2015. This was also the Star Wars Celebration where Rogue One was revealed to everyone, but in the end it didn't work out and it never got announced, hence never got released. So we could have been looking at, you know, the title's never confirmed, but Boba Fett, a Star Wars story, something like that, another standalone film, a bit like the Solo one. Now the thing about this is, if it wasn't, this would have obviously been really cool, but now we're getting the Book of Boba and he's in Mandalorian. I'm actually not too you know, down that it never got released. Obviously if we never got the Book of Boba or Mando, it would have been quite a shame because a standalone film would have been really cool. Boba Fett, obviously an amazing character, everyone loves him, everyone wanted to see more of him. What time period this would have been in, this could have ended up being very different to things like the Book of Boba Fett though, because with things like that we're looking at him after episode 6, whereas this standalone movie could have well been during episode 4, 5 sort of time, and that would have been really cool. Like, I've got to admit, I would like to see more content of Boba Fett during his prime. Like, obviously Book of Boba, all that's really cool, but it's a lot later on. Seeing him, you know, between episode 4, 5, that sort of his prime bounty hunting time, or between 3 and 4 really, more towards episode 4 though, that would be really cool, seeing Boba Fett in his prime bounty hunting period. I think that would have been really cool because obviously we didn't get to see that much of him in the original trilogy, so a standalone film would have been cool, but it's not too much, it's not too bad because we got Book of Boba and all that. But the chances of this happening because of Book of Boba and everything are quite low now. I'd say this is definitely, I'm in 2 minds because part of me says it is quite likely that it could still go ahead because it's a very plausible movie, it's something they could quite easily do and everyone wants it, but now they've done Book of Boba Fett, I think it will have definitely got pushed to the sidelines. They're already covering so much Boba Fett stuff in Mando and all that, I feel like it's not as needed now, but again, I would welcome it with open arms if it ever got released. So second on the list is, this one's a show and this one is a big one for me. This one was something I was really excited for and it's not really talked about much. I don't see it talked about much, if at all, nowadays. For the past couple of years I've barely seen anyone talk about it, but it used to get talked about so much and I was really excited for it. I remember talking about it to my friend all the time, and it was given the title Star Wars Underworlds. So this was a live action TV project. It was going to be a TV show and it looked really cool. It was talked about as far back as 2005 Obviously I definitely wasn't talking about it then, I couldn't even talk, yet alone be into Star Wars in 2005, but as you can tell, it was talked about as far back as 2005, so this was a really old rumour. This was like a proper old one, and I remember talking about it like 8 years ago with my friend, like a really long time ago. And this show, to this day, still really interests me. I think it is so cool, and the concept of it's amazing. So this was obviously something that was being worked on before Disney took over, and it was going to be a very George Lucas centric show and project. He was very heavily involved in it, and it is said that there's, I think, 20 scripted episodes that have been written. I remember there's this like rumour going around saying there's like 200 episodes, and he just kept writing it and they kept writing it, and there's so many episodes, but I know there's like definitely at least like 20 confirmed episodes that were written, and they were waiting for the technological advancements to actually make the show. I guess they were just waiting, like he kind of did with the prequels. He was waiting, and then when he got the technology he could finally make his visions come true, and it was probably the same with this. So the show was said to be set between episode 3 and 4, so it was a very, like, you know, kind of, but this would have been the first content we got between episode 3 and 4, probably, you know, like live action content we got showing like the period of the Empire taking over from the Republic, which would have been really cool, which was also what made it so much more exciting back then when we talked about it, because we didn't have anything like that. There wasn't even Rebels, there was nothing like that where we could actually see between episode 3 and 4, so that's what made it all the more exciting. It was given a launch date of 2010, that was like their heavily talked about launch date, but it just never happened. Disney took over Lucasfilm, they just pushed under the rug, I guess. So Star Wars Underworld was going to be about the Coruscant Underworld, and although they're obviously not doing anything like that exactly, if you look at the Book of Boba Fett, that has a very high potential and likelihood to be a bit like this, because this was a show which was very heavily delving into like the drug world and really, like, you know, the crime of Star Wars. And you know, Book of Boba Fett is probably most likely going to be doing that as well. It's going to be talking about the criminal underworld. The show was described as complex, dark and adult, and although I was a child, that was still really cool to me, because like, just imagine seeing like the proper Coruscant Underworld is such a cool place. It's got such an amazing atmosphere and so much goes on down there. Like, I love the Clone Wars episodes where we see it, the one where Ahsoka loses her lightsaber and goes down with the older Jedi to retrieve it. I just think Coruscant Underworld is such a cool place, so having a live action show in it would have been incredible, especially during the time that the Empire was taking it over, seeing all them trying to maybe control the underworld while all these different bounty hunters, crime lords try to do their thing. And I just think that would have been so cool to see all the really gritty, dark parts of Star Wars and that criminal underworld, that sort of element. And Coruscant Underworld is just such a dark, gloomy place. I think it would have been incredible to see. So number 3 on the list is a bit of a touchy subject, but I grouped them all together, and it is George Lucas's episode 7, 8 and 9. So these ones are a bit controversial. Some people really want to see them, some people don't, but it is confirmed that George Lucas did write out scripts for episode 7, 8 and 9. So something that I found out which I thought was really interesting, which I'd never actually heard before, was that the first time, according to Mark Hamill, the first time he heard about these sequels was all the way back in 1976 when they were actually filming the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope. And that between takes, when they were sitting in the desert filming the film, George Lucas told him that he had 12 movies planned, and the sequels, so episode 9 in particular, would be filmed somewhere around 2011 when Mark Hamill was the right age to play the role. So I think this is so interesting. Obviously George Lucas's plans probably changed a lot over them 40 years or 30 years, and it did say 12 movies. Whether he still actually has 12 in mind, I don't know. It probably could have just been reduced to 9 and he had the sequels but didn't have anything planned after that. And the script of these films probably changed a lot over time as well, after the prequels came out and everything like that. it probably changed a lot, but it's just so incredible to see that he did actually, even when filming the first Star Wars, have these sequels in mind and have an idea of what they were going to be like and how many films they were going to be, and even the fact that he had an idea of filming them in 2011, which was around the time that the sequels were produced by Disney as well. I mean, if they ever did release his, it'd be cool. I don't think they're gonna. I honestly think that's off the table. I mean, you could argue maybe they'll do like a Schneider cut type thing like they did with the Justice League and one day bring out George Lucas's version, but I honestly just can't see it happening. Like, I really don't. Maybe one day the scripts might get released, or it might get released in a form of a novel. I can only ever see the potential of it being released in a novel, which I would be happy with, honestly. Like, if we get to see what he had in mind, that's good for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of like, at this point, like, we got given what we got given. We've kind of just got to move on. If you like them, you do. If you don't, you don't. Everyone has their own opinion. It's all good. But I would love to see what his would have been like. So if it was just releasing a novel or the script, just to see what he had in mind, I think that'd be really cool. Just to see, almost like an alternate universe, what could have happened. So number 4 in the list is a Mos Eisley Spaceport film. Now this is another very recent one. This was back in mid-2018. Disney announced that they were gonna put all the standalone movies on hold after Solo, and this Mos Eisley Spaceport film was one of the ones to take the hit. So this standalone movie was going to be presumably a lot about like the crime and that sort of element. Going to probably involve a lot of bounty hunters, as Obi-Wan says. Mos Eisley Spaceport, you'll never find a more wretched hive of villainy and scum. So this one could have been pretty cool. I love Mos Eisley Spaceport, love Tatooine. I think it's really cool, and it would have been cool to see sort of the crime and bounty hunting on Tatooine and all that, but I don't really think we could still get it one day. This is the thing, this is a very recent one and it hasn't been like officially like cancelled. I don't think it's been officially cancelled forever or anything. We could still see it, but I don't really feel like we need to now, especially with the announcement of Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I feel like that's probably gonna feature Mos Eisley Spaceport quite a lot, you would assume. I will probably see Mos Eisley Spaceport quite a lot in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, so I don't really feel like we need a standalone film on it. It's definitely not on the top of my list, but if we got it, it'd be alright, you know. But I don't really think with Obi-Wan Kenobi show we'll really need it, because we'll be seeing more than enough Tatooine on that show as it is, and presumably a lot of Mos Eisley Spaceport. So number 5 I think is really interesting, which is why I included it on this list. It's not really relevant now, but I think it's a really cool and interesting story. So this is Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and this is so interesting because this was actually originally written in case the first Star Wars bombed and flopped in the cinemas. So if A New Hope didn't do well in cinemas and bombed, Splinter of the Mind's Eye was going to be the sequel to it, but it was like the low budget version almost. So George Lucas planned on filming the sequel if the first Star Wars didn't do well. But as a lot of you will probably know, Splinter of the Mind's Eye is actually a novel, so you can read it. It's a Legends novel and it was written by Alan Dean Foster. So although the low budget film was never actually made, it can still be read. It got released as a novel, a Star Wars Legends novel. So if you want, you can read it, and that's sort of apparently what was said to be the sequel if the first Star Wars didn't go as well as planned. So yeah, I just thought this was really cool and something really interesting, and something I didn't actually know about the novel. I didn't actually realise that the novel was intended originally was that title, and that was sort of seen to be the sequel of A New Hope if it didn't do well. And I just think that's really cool and really interesting to see how it could have changed and how the original trilogy could have differed if things didn't go to plan. So that is number 5 on the list. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it, and make sure to stay tuned for all the future content. I've got lots of interesting and exciting things coming out, all the Star Wars news, Star Wars lore videos, and all the upcoming fan fictions and what ifs. But that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
Show me the one whose safety deems such destruction. This is the way.